Jesus reveals the secret behind your anxiety. Find peace today. Have you ever wondered why, even in the silence of the night, your mind finds no rest? As if an invisible storm raged inside you, bringing thoughts that consume you, fears that seem to have no end, and an anxiety that squeezes your chest as if it were an impossible weight to carry. You smile at others, but inside you fight an anguish that no one sees. It's like being trapped in a dark maze where every exit seems to lead to more worries. Have you ever felt this way? Lost, suffocated, desperately yearning for a peace that never comes? But what if I told you that this peace is not just a distant dream? That there is a spiritual secret revealed by Jesus that has the power to transform this storm into calm, this despair into hope. Few people know this truth because it has been hidden over the centuries, a spiritual key that few have discovered. And today, you are about to receive that key. It's no coincidence that you got here. Jesus reveals something to you that can change your life forever. But before continuing, I want to invite you to an act of faith. If this message is already touching your heart, leave your "I liked" in this video. It's not just a gesture, it's a seed that you plant so that this word can reach other lives that also need peace. And if you want to continue receiving messages of healing, hope, and transformation, certify that you are registered in the channel. Jesus has much more to reveal to you. In the comments, I invite you to declare with faith, "Jesus, I surrender my anxiety into your hands." Let this not just be a comment, but a prayer, a declaration that you choose to trust Him. Because the peace you seek so much is closer than you imagine. Take a deep breath. You are not here by chance. Jesus reveals something profound to you, something that can transform your life forever. Every word you hear here is like a seed of peace being planted in your heart. You've carried this anxiety for too long, trying to be strong alone, fighting in silence, while your heart cried out for relief. But today, you are no longer alone. We are a community of faith, a family of hearts that seek healing and peace in Jesus. And I want you to know that what you're about to hear might be exactly what you needed. But before continuing, I invite you to an act of faith and love. If this message is already touching your heart, leave a like on this video. This is not just a gesture, it is a seed that you plant, allowing this word of hope to reach other people who are also in need. Because each like is like a light that turns on, illuminating the path of those who are in the dark. And if you want to continue being part of this faith community, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Here, you are not alone. Each message is a spiritual embrace, guidance for those who seek the peace that only Jesus can give. Join thousands who are rediscovering the strength in trusting God. And now, prepare your heart, because what you are about to hear could be the beginning of your liberation. Jesus revealed something powerful about this anxiety you carry, and you will discover it now. And even when everything seems lost, when the weight of anxiety crushes your chest and thoughts turn into storms that never cease, there is a hidden truth that few know, a truth that can change everything. Maybe you've already felt this. The heart racing for no apparent reason, the constant fear of what's to come, that suffocating feeling that something terrible is going to happen even if everything around you seems normal. You try hard to stay calm. You smile at others. But inside, it's like there's a constant war going on, a battle that no one sees, but that you face alone, until now. Today, I want to take you to a story that carries a profound revelation, a truth that Jesus revealed, and that has the power to silence those voices of fear and bring peace to your heart. Imagine a dark night. The sea is rough. The fierce waves are crashing against the boat. Jesus' disciples are there, fighting the storm, their hands tired, their hearts filled with fear. And then, amidst the chaos, they see something coming towards them. A figure walking on the water. Fear turns into panic. "It's a ghost!" they scream. But then a voice echoes in the darkness. "It is I. Do not be afraid." Matthew 14:27. Peter, with his heart racing, shouts, "Lord, if it is you, send me to meet you on the water." And Jesus responds with a single word, "Come." Pedro steps out of the boat, For a moment, he experiences the impossible. His feet touch the water, and he walks. But then, the wind blows stronger. His eyes move away from Jesus and focus on the storm. The fear returns, and at that moment, he starts to sink. "Lord, save me!" he cries, and immediately, Jesus' hand holds him. Have you ever felt like Pedro? Brave for a moment, but then consumed by fear? Trusting, but quickly being swallowed up by doubt? This story is not just about Peter. It's about you. About everyone who at some point tried to keep the faith, but was overcome by anxiety. But there's something you need to understand. It wasn't the wind that made Pedro sink. It was his gaze, which stopped being on Jesus and fixed on the storm. And today, you may be facing your own storm. It could be fear of the future, the dread of losing control, or that feeling that something terrible is going to happen. But the truth is that as long as your eyes are on the storm, anxiety will grow. However, if you fix your gaze on Jesus, the peace that surpasses all understanding will flood your heart. What if I told you that your anxiety is not just a psychological problem, that there is a spiritual root, a lack of connection with this peace that only Jesus can give? You've tried so many things: breathing techniques, advice from friends, temporary distractions. But nothing seems to work, because true healing is not in superficial solutions, but in a profound change, in an encounter with the one who calms the storms. Are you noticing? It's not just about overcoming fear. It's about rediscovering Jesus' gaze in the midst of his storm. And that's why you're here. Because today, Jesus reveals this truth to you. A truth that is not just an ancient story, but a reality that can transform your life now. If you want to experience this peace, it is not enough to just listen. You need to declare, act in faith. In the comments, write, "Jesus, I surrender my anxiety into your hands." Let this be more than words. Let it be a sincere prayer. And if you want this message to reach more people who are drowning in their own storms, enjoy this video as a leap of faith. Each like is like a light that turns on, bringing hope to those who need it. There is a peace that only He can give. And what you will discover in the next few minutes could be what you need to transform your life. And just when you think you've carried enough, that the pain and fear have consumed every part of your heart, a new storm arises. A strong wind that seems to tear away the last hopes you had. A darkness that invades your thoughts. A silent voice that says, "You won't make it. You are not enough." How many times have you felt this way? Lost in a sea of doubts, drowned by worries that seem to have no end. Maybe you looked around and saw smiles, lights, life, but inside the emptiness remains. An overwhelming feeling that no matter how hard you fight, you are never good enough. And the more you try, the more you feel lost. You look at others and ask yourself, why can't I? What's wrong with me? That's how Moses felt. Yes, Moses, the one who became a great leader, the man who led an entire people to freedom. But before all that, he was just a man full of insecurities, looking at himself and seeing only weakness. Moses stood before the burning bush, hearing the voice of God calling him to an impossible mission. But instead of courage, he felt fear. "Who am I to go to Pharaoh?" he questioned. "I am just a man without eloquence, without power." And maybe you feel exactly that way, looking at your challenges and thinking, "I can't do it. I'm not enough." But God looked at Moses and said, "I will be with you." It wasn't about Moses' ability, but about who was with him. And that's the truth that few understand. It's not about what you can do, but about who's by your side. You may be feeling small, weak, incapable, but Jesus reveals to you that you are not alone, that your strength does not come from you, but from Him, that He chooses those who the world despises, those who feel small, because it is in them that His power is revealed. And that's what you need to understand today, that you are not here by chance, that every tear, every doubt, every fear you felt was seen by God. And He is telling you, "I will be with you." But why is it so hard to believe? Because the world around you screams that you are not good enough. Because comparison is a constant shadow, making you forget who you really are. Moses could have fled. He could have let fear win, but he decided to trust. And by taking a step of faith, He saw the impossible happen. The sea parted, the people were freed, and Moses became a symbol of leadership and faith. But it all started when he chose to believe. He wasn't alone. And you? Are you willing to trust? To believe that even if you feel small, God is with you? That He sees your potential, even when you only see weaknesses? That He is your strength, even when everything around you seems to fall apart? Maybe you've spent so long listening to the lies of insecurity that you've forgotten who you really are. And now I ask you, will you continue to believe the voice of doubt? Or will you choose to listen to the voice of God that says, I will be with you? Because it is in this moment of choice that everything changes. When you decide that your life will not be defined by your fears, but by the faith you carry. When you choose to let go of the weight of comparison and embrace the truth that you are loved, chosen, and called. So, if this message spoke to you, leave it in the comments. I believe that God is with me, because when you declare this, you are not just writing words. You are affirming your faith. You are breaking the chains of insecurity and declaring that your trust is not in yourself, but in God who sustains you. And if this message is touching your heart, if you feel like you need this truth every day, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Because here you are not alone. We are together, a community of faith that walks side by side, discovering the peace and strength that only Jesus can give. Leave your like as an act of faith, so that this message reaches more people who also need to hear that they are not alone. Like, comment, share, because this word is not just for you, it is for everyone who needs to discover that, even when they feel small, God is with them. But there is something even deeper that you need to understand. A secret that will transform the way you see your life, that will show you that your weaknesses can be the stage where God's power reveals itself. You are about to discover a truth that could change everything. So stay here, because what comes next is even more powerful. And even when it seems like the weight of worries is unbearable, when the mind becomes a battlefield where thoughts don't stop racing, there is something that few realize. Anxiety is not just a feeling. She is a constant voice. A shadow that settles in the corners of the mind and turns the smallest problem into a giant one. It's that restlessness that doesn't allow you to rest. That feeling that something is always about to go wrong. You find yourself stuck in a spiral of thoughts. What if I don't make it? What if everything goes wrong? What if no one is with me? And little by little, your heart quickens, your breathing becomes heavy, and peace becomes just a distant memory. But what many don't know is that this restlessness has a deeper root, something that goes beyond what the eyes can see. And that's exactly what happened to Martha. Martha, a woman known for her dedication, her desire to serve, her concern for every detail. She was always doing her best, always busy, always trying to please. But amid all this effort, something was lost. The peace. Martha was so worried about doing everything right that she forgot the most important thing. One afternoon, when Jesus was at his house, Martha was running around, preparing food, organizing the house, trying to make sure everything was perfect. But in his heart, a storm was brewing. She looked at her sister Mary, who was sitting at Jesus' feet, listening to his words, and resentment took over. Lord, don't you mind that my sister leaves me alone with all the work? Tell her to help me. Jesus' response was like a ray of light in the darkness. Martha, Martha, you are worried and worried about many things, but only one is necessary. How? Many times do you feel like Martha too, running from one place to another, trying to do everything, trying to please everyone, but feeling like it's never enough. You worry about the future, what others think, what could go wrong. And in the midst of all these worries, he forgets to simply be at the feet of Jesus, to hear his words, to find rest in his presence. Anxiety becomes an invisible chain that binds your mind and heart, and you get lost in an endless list of what-ifs. But Jesus reveals something powerful to you today. It's not about everything you do. It's about where your heart is, because when you put your heart into the worries of this world, they become giants. But when you set your heart on Jesus, he becomes your refuge. Perhaps you are carrying the weight of responsibilities that were never yours. Maybe you've gotten used to living in constant tension, always waiting for something bad to happen. And that's exactly what anxiety does. It turns tomorrow into a threat, even when nothing has happened. It makes you get lost in fearful thoughts, in worries that steal your peace. But today, you are faced with a truth that could change everything. Jesus is saying to you, you are troubled about many things, but only one is necessary, being with me. Because it is in his presence that true peace reveals itself. It is not in the absence of problems, but in the certainty that you are not alone, that he is with you. And maybe you look at your life and think, but I have so many responsibilities, I can't just stop. And it's true. Life brings challenges. It brings commitments. But there is a difference between fulfilling your responsibilities and being consumed by them. Martha was next to Jesus, but her heart was far away. And that's what anxiety does. It keeps you busy but empty. And today, Jesus is calling you to something greater, to let go of the worries that suffocate you and find rest at his feet, because it's not what you do, but who you are in Christ that really matters. And now I ask you, how many times have you felt like Martha, running around, worried, trying to get everything done but forgetting to simply be with Jesus? If this message spoke to you, I want you to declare this in the comments. Jesus is my peace. Because by declaring this, you are making a decision of faith. You are choosing to let go of the worries that consume you and embrace the peace that only Jesus can give. And if you feel like you need this peace every day, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Because here together, we are learning to rest in Jesus. Leave your like as an act of faith so that this message reaches more people who are also trapped in the chains of anxiety. But there is something even deeper that you need to understand, a truth that few know, but that can completely transform the way you face your fears. Stay here, because what comes next might be just what you need to find a peace the world can't steal. And even when the silence feels overwhelming, when you feel lost in a crowd but completely alone, there's something you need to know, because there is a pain that consumes the heart that does not scream but suffocates. A pain that hides behind forced smiles, empty words, a false strength that you try to demonstrate to others, but that, inside, turns into loneliness. It's the weight of not having anyone to share your anguish with, of feeling like no one really understands what you're going through. A loneliness that is not just being alone, but feeling invisible, ignored, abandoned. Have you ever felt this way? As if, even when there are a lot of people around, no one really sees you? And that's exactly how Elijah felt, a powerful prophet who had seen the fire of God come down from heaven, who had faced kings and false prophets. But after a great victory, he found himself on the run, pursued, afraid, alone. He ran into the desert, looking for a place to hide, a place to disappear. And there, under a juniper tree, he fell, exhausted and desperate. "Enough, Lord! Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." These were the words of a man who, even though he had seen the power of God, was now consumed by loneliness and hopelessness. He felt useless, forgotten, without purpose. And just like Elijah, perhaps you too have looked at your life and asked yourself, what's the point? Nobody cares. Nobody understands me. But what happened next was a revelation that changed everything. In the midst of that darkness, God did not abandon him. An angel appeared, touched Elijah, and said to him, "Get up and eat." And when Elijah looked, he saw bread and water beside him. Even in his loneliness, God was watching over him. But that wasn't all. Because after walking for 40 days, Elijah entered a cave, still carrying that pain. And it was there, in that deep silence, that God called him. "Elias, what are you doing here?" And then there was a strong wind, but God was not in the wind. There was an earthquake, but God was not in the earthquake. There was fire, but God was not in the fire. And after all that, came a soft whisper. And it was there, in the whisper, that Elijah heard the voice of God. Do you realize what this means? Maybe you are waiting for God to reveal himself in something great, in a visible miracle, in a radical change. But often he speaks in a whisper, in the silence, deep in your heart. He speaks when everyone moves away, when the world becomes silent, when loneliness seems to consume you. Because it is there, in your deepest pain, that He is closest to you. He does not ignore your tears. He does not despise your suffering. Rather, it is there that He whispers, "I am here. You are not alone." And maybe you've lived surrounded by people, but feeling invisible. Maybe you have so many acquaintances, but no one to really listen to your heart. Maybe you're trying to be strong, trying to keep up appearances, but inside, you're screaming for help. And today, Jesus reveals something powerful to you. He sees you, even when no one else sees it. He understands your tears, even when no one else does. And He is with you, even when you feel like everyone has left. And here is the truth that few know. Loneliness is not the absence of people around you, but the absence of connection. And when you connect with Jesus, when you hear His whisper, even silence becomes a place of peace. Because He is the God who meets you in the cave, the God who does not abandon you even when you feel forgotten, the God who calls you by name, who reminds you that you are loved, that you are seen. And now, I ask you, how many times have you felt like Elijah, strong on the outside but destroyed on the inside, surrounded by people but alone in your pain? If this message spoke to you, if you feel like you need to hear God's voice in the midst of your silence, I want you to declare it in the comments. Jesus, speak to me. Because by declaring this, you are opening your heart to hear God's whisper. You are saying that you no longer want to walk alone, that you no longer want to hide in the cave of loneliness. And if this word touched your heart, if you know you need more messages like this to strengthen your faith and find peace, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Because here together, we are learning to hear God's voice in the midst of silence. And leave your like, not just as a reaction, but as an act of faith, so that this message reaches more people who are also trapped in loneliness. But I need to tell you something more, because there is a truth that many ignore, but that can completely transform the way you face loneliness. A truth that will make you see that, even in the darkest moments, you were never alone. Stay here, because what comes next may be exactly what you need to understand, that there is a powerful presence by your side. Even when everything seems empty, and even when it seems like everything is under control, there is a restlessness that consumes you, a subtle fear that starts as a light thought but quickly turns into a storm. It's that fear that something will go wrong, that no matter how much you plan, no matter how much you try, something will slip out of your hands. A suffocating feeling that the world is about to collapse at any moment. And maybe you don't show it, maybe you smile at others, but inside, your heart is racing. Your mind never rests. You find yourself constantly caught between the desire to control everything and the fear of losing control. And that anxiety grows, spreads, until it feels like the ground beneath your feet is disappearing, and you are not alone in this feeling. Peter, the courageous disciple, the man who had the faith to walk on water, also knew this fear. When Jesus called him to get out of the boat, Peter took his first steps of faith, of courage, of trust. But then, the wind blew stronger, the waves churned, and suddenly the one who was walking on the water began to sink. Fear invaded his heart, and he cried out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus stretched out his hand and took hold of Peter and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Matthew 14:31. Do you realize what this means? It wasn't the wind that made Pedro sink. It wasn't the waves. It was fear that grew in his heart, the fear of losing control, the fear that even with Jesus by your side, something terrible could happen. And it is exactly this fear that often holds you back. You try to control everything, your life, your choices, your emotions, but it always feels like something is out of your reach. It's as if you're walking on choppy water, trying to keep your balance, but at any moment a wave can knock you over. But what you may not have realized is that Jesus was there the whole time. And even when Peter began to sink, even when his fear overwhelmed him, Jesus' hand was ready to hold him up. And maybe that's what you need to understand today, that it's not about the control you have, It's not about how hard you try to avoid problems. It's about who you're looking at, because as Peter looked at Jesus, he walked on the water. But when his eyes looked away, fear consumed him. And maybe today you are drowning in worries. Maybe you feel like your life is out of control, that at any moment, something terrible is going to happen. Maybe you are living in constant anxiety, trying to predict the future, trying to control everything and everyone around you. But just as Jesus reached out to Peter, he reaches out to you now. Because it's not about the strength of the storm. It's about who's in the middle of it with you. Have you ever wondered how many times fear has paralyzed you? How many opportunities have you missed because you were afraid of failing? How many relationships have you destroyed because you were afraid of getting hurt? How many dreams have you abandoned because you were afraid you weren't good enough? Fear is a prison. A prison that stops you from living, that makes you think about worst-case scenarios, that keeps you in a constant state of alert, as if you were always waiting for the next disaster. But today, Jesus reveals a powerful truth to you. Fear has no power over you when your eyes are on Jesus, because he is the firm rock in the midst of the storm. He is the voice that calms the winds. He is the hand that holds you up when you feel like you are sinking. And even if you are afraid, even if your faith is small, he does not abandon you. He is always by your side, ready to rescue you. And now, I want you to look inside yourself. Where has fear held you back? What have you been desperately trying to control, but that always seems to escape your grasp? Is it your future, your relationships, your job, your health? I want you to take a deep breath and give this to Jesus. Because while you try to hold everything in your own hands, you keep drowning. But when you surrender control to him, you discover that peace is possible, even in the midst of the storm. If this message spoke to your heart, I invite you to declare in the comments, Jesus, I trust in you. Because that is the key to overcoming fear. It's not about eliminating the storm, but about trusting the one who is with you in the midst of it. And if you know you need more messages like this to strengthen your faith, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Because together, we are learning to walk on water and leave your like not just as a reaction, but as an act of faith, so that this message reaches more people who are drowning in their fears. But there's something else I need to tell you. Because there is a truth that many ignore, but that can completely transform the way you face fear. A truth that will make you see that even when everything seems out of control, there is a powerful hand that never lets you fall. What follows may be just what you need to understand that the control you seek is not in your hands, but in the hands of Jesus. And even when it seems like forgiveness is a distant promise, when guilt becomes a burden you carry every day, there is a truth that few see. Guilt is an invisible prison, a shadow that follows your every step, a constant whisper that reminds you of every mistake, every failure, every word you wish you could erase. And maybe you don't show it. Maybe you even smile and say it's okay. But inside, there's a silent pain that never goes away. A voice that tells you that you are not worthy, that you have failed, that you have let God down, the people around you, and yourself. Have you ever wondered why guilt is so powerful? Why does it paralyze you? Why, even after so long, do you still remember that mistake, that wrong choice, that word said in a moment of anger? Maybe it's because guilt is like a chain that ties you to the past. And the worst thing is, the more you try to escape, the more trapped you seem to be. And you are not alone in this feeling. Peter, one of Jesus' closest disciples, knew the pain of guilt like few others. That night when Jesus was arrested, Peter, the one who had promised to follow the Master until the end, denied knowing him, not once, not two, but 3 times. And the worst of all, at the exact moment he denied Jesus for the 3rd time, the rooster crowed. And Jesus turned and looked at Peter, a look that pierced his heart, a look that was not of condemnation, but of pain. Peter went out and wept bitterly. Luke 22:61-62. Can you imagine this moment? The weight of guilt that fell on Peter? The man who walked alongside Jesus, who saw miracles, who heard teachings directly from the Master, now saw himself as a traitor. Someone who failed at the moment when he most needed to be faithful. And maybe you felt it too. Perhaps you have already promised God that you would do what is right, but ended up making the same mistake. Maybe you've hurt someone you loved, said words you never should have said, made decisions that left deep marks on your soul. But here's what you need to understand. Jesus' look at Peter was not a look of condemnation. It was a look of love, because Jesus knew that Peter would fail. He knew that human weakness is part of all of us, but he also knew that this would not be the end of Peter's story. Because where guilt tries to bind, Jesus' forgiveness sets us free. And that's exactly what happened. After the resurrection, Jesus met Peter and asked him 3 times, "Do you love me?" And Peter, with a broken heart, replied, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you," 3 times, one for each denial. And Jesus not only forgave Peter but restored him, called him to feed his sheep. Do you realize what this means? That your mistake is not the end, that guilt is not your destiny, that even if you have failed, even if you have walked away, Jesus is ready to forgive you. But the problem is that guilt often becomes a barrier. You can't forgive yourself. You believe that God could never forgive you because you can't forgive yourself. You carry the weight of your mistakes as if it were a sentence that never ends. But Jesus reveals something powerful to you today. Forgiveness is not about what you deserve. It's about what he has already done for you. On the cross, he took upon himself all your faults, all your mistakes, all your guilt. And when he said, "It is finished," he was declaring that the price was paid, that the debt has been canceled, that you are free. But do you really believe that? Or are you still stuck in the past? Do you keep reminding yourself of your mistakes, allowing them to define who you are? Do you look in the mirror and still see an unworthy person, a failure, a person who will never be enough? If this is true, then you are living a lie. Because the truth is, you are loved, you are forgiven, you are restored. And maybe you say, "But I don't deserve it." And you're right, nobody deserves it. But Jesus' love is not based on what you deserve. It's based on who he is. He is the God who forgives. He is the God who restores. He is the God who transforms guilt into grace, failure into redemption, sin into a testimony of transformation. I want you to look inside yourself now. What have you not yet forgiven about yourself? What is the error you still carry? What is the guilt that prevents you from feeling loved by God? I want you to turn this over to Jesus now, because while you carry this guilt, you are moving away from the forgiveness he has already given you. And I invite you to do something powerful. I invite you to write in the comments, "I receive forgiveness from Jesus." Write this as an act of faith, as a declaration that guilt will no longer hold you back. And if this word spoke to your heart, I invite you to leave a like, not just as a reaction, but as an act of faith. Because there are a lot of people who need to hear this. There are many people who are trapped in guilt and need to know that forgiveness is possible. But I need to tell you something more, because there is a truth that few know, but that can completely transform the way you deal with guilt. A truth that will show you that your biggest mistake can become your greatest testimony, that what you most fear remembering can become the greatest proof of God's love in your life. Don't leave now, because what comes next may be just what you need to understand, that guilt will never have the last word. And even when guilt feels like an inescapable prison, there is an even quieter, more devastating pain that many carry without realizing it. The feeling of spiritual abandonment. Have you ever felt this way? As if God were far away? As if your prayers were just words thrown into the wind, with no answer, no return, no hope? There are times when God's silence seems louder than any scream, heavier than any burden. And this feeling of emptiness, that God is not present, can turn the heart into a desert, where faith dries up and hope disappears. But you are not alone in this feeling. Even those closest to God have passed through this dark valley. Jesus, the Son of God, who walked among us, also knew the weight of this anguish. In the Garden of Gethsemane, on a night of pain and loneliness, Jesus walked away from his disciples, and with an anguished heart, fell to his knees. Sweat mingled with blood ran down his face as he cried out, "My Father, if it be possible, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." Matthew 26:39. Can you feel the weight of these words? the Son of God, the one who had the power to calm storms, heal the sick, and raise the dead, now found himself alone, struggling with a pain that no one around him could understand. And perhaps you have felt this way too, in a dark night of the soul, when your prayers seem to beat against a bronze sky, when God's presence seems like a distant memory. Maybe you've asked yourself, has God forgotten me? Is he listening to me? Does he really care? But here is the secret that Jesus reveals to you. God's silence is not absence. It is an invitation to a deeper faith, because as Jesus wept and cried, out in the garden the sky seemed silent, but God was not far away. God was present. He did not stop the pain, but he was there, supporting the sun in the midst of anguish. And perhaps you need to understand this today. God's silence is not abandonment. It is a test. It is a time when your faith is refined, when your heart is prepared for something greater. And what happened after that night in Gethsemane? Jesus was betrayed, arrested, humiliated, crucified. It felt like the end. It seemed that God's silence had won. But on the third day, silence turned into victory. The empty tomb became proof that God never abandons his own, that even when all seems lost, there is a resurrection waiting for those who stand firm. And maybe that's what you need to hear today, that even if you don't feel it, God is with you. That even if your prayers seem unanswered, he is listening. That even though heaven seems silent, the Father is preparing something you cannot see. Because faith is not about feeling God's presence all the time. It's about believing that he is there, even when the world says otherwise. Have you ever stopped to think that God's silence is, in fact, a way for him to teach you to trust? Because it's easy to believe when everything goes well, when blessings are visible, when prayers are answered quickly. But what about when everything seems to fall apart, and when the sky seems closed, and when fear tries to dominate you? It is in these moments that true faith is revealed. And perhaps today, you are experiencing this silence. Maybe your prayers have turned into tears. Maybe you feel like God is far away. But I need you to understand something. Silence is not the end. It is an invitation for you to come even closer to God. It is an invitation for you to keep praying, keep believing, keep hoping, and if you think no one understands your pain, remember Jesus in Gethsemane. He understands. He knows your anguish. He knows what it's like to feel alone, what it's like to cry out without hearing an immediate answer. But he also knows that the resurrection is the end of the story, and that is his promise to you, that after silence comes victory, that after the pain comes relief, that after the darkness comes the light. I want you to do something now. Close your eyes and take a deep breath. Feel the silence around you. But instead of fearing it, accept it as an invitation to draw closer to God. Tell him what's in your heart. It doesn't matter if you don't have nice words. It doesn't matter if all you have are tears. God understands. And even if you don't feel it, he is listening. And I invite you to leave in the comments, I believe, even in silence. Write it down as a leap of faith, because sometimes all God expects from you is that you trust. May you believe even when you don't see it. May you continue even when you don't feel it. And if this word touched your heart, I invite you to leave a like, not as an automatic gesture, but as a declaration of faith, as a way of saying, I trust God even in silence. But there is something you still need to understand, because there is a secret about God's silence that few know, something that can completely transform the way you deal with these moments of spiritual emptiness, something that can show you that silence is not just an absence, but a preparation for a much greater revelation. What comes next might be just what you need to find peace amidst the silence. And even when silence seems like an unbearable burden, there is an even more paralyzing pain, the fear of making mistakes again. Have you ever felt this? An overwhelming feeling that any step you take could lead to failure, that any choice could turn into regret. And then, you stop. You avoid decisions. You run away from opportunities, because the pain of making mistakes seems stronger than the desire to try. But is living like this really living? Or is it just surviving in a prison of fear and insecurity? Maybe you've felt this at crucial moments in your life. That job you didn't take because you were afraid you weren't good enough. That relationship you avoided for fear of getting hurt. That dream you abandoned because you were sure it would fail. And each time the fear of failure wins, it grows stronger, becoming a voice that whispers in your mind, "You can't do it. You will fail. Don't try." But what if I told you that you are not alone in this feeling? That even God's chosen ones, those called to great purposes, have also faced this paralyzing fear. I want to tell you about Jonas, a man called by God to preach repentance in Nineveh, a city steeped in sin. But instead of obeying, Jonas fled. He ran away because he was afraid. He was afraid of being rejected. He was afraid of failing. He was afraid that the mission was too big for him. He got on a ship, trying to escape God's call, but the storm found him. Have you ever realized that running away from your purpose doesn't protect you from fear, but brings you closer to it? Jonas, at the bottom of the boat, in the middle of the storm, discovered this. And even when he was thrown into the sea, swallowed by a large fish, he still could not escape the voice of God. There, in the depths, where the darkness was absolute and hope seemed lost, Jonah finally cried out, and God heard him. The God he tried to avoid, the God he feared displeasing, was the same God who rescued him. And maybe you are like Jonah, trapped in the depths of a fear of your own making, running away from opportunities, avoiding challenges, hiding from the call that God placed on your life. But here is the secret that Jesus reveals to you. The fear of making mistakes is not a prison, it is a choice. Because even if you fail, God is there to lift you up. Even if you fall, He is the arm that supports you. And as long as you are alive, He will always give you a new chance. Have you ever stopped to think that Jonah's biggest mistake was not running away, but believing that God would give up on him? And how many times have you thought the same? That because of your mistakes, God gave up on you? That because of your failures, you are no longer worthy of the calling He has placed on your life? But if God didn't give up on Jonah, why would He give up on you? The God who reached you in the depths of the sea is the same God who is at your side now. And He is not condemning you. He is calling you to try again. And do you know what happened after Jonas was rescued? God called him again. The same calling, the same mission, the same Nineveh. And this time, Jonas obeyed, and the city regretted it. He who was afraid of failing became the instrument of salvation for thousands. Because it's not about your mistakes. It's about the God who lifts you up. It's not about your past. It's about the purpose He has for you. And maybe today, you need to hear this, that your fear of making mistakes does not define who you are, that every time you fall, it's an opportunity to get up even stronger, that God is not waiting for you to be perfect, He is waiting for you to be faithful. May you trust Him more than you trust your own fears. May you understand that your value is not in your ability to never make mistakes, but in your willingness to start over. I know the fear is real. I know the voices that tell you you're not good enough seem deafening. But there is a stronger voice, a voice that whispers in the silence, "I am with you." This is the voice of God. And He didn't bring you here to abandon you. He didn't put dreams in your heart to see you fail. He did not give you gifts for you to hide. And even if you've messed up in the past, that doesn't mean you're destined to fail in the future. But now I want to challenge you, because living in fear is easy. Running away is easy. Giving up is easy. But trusting God and trying again is for the brave. And I ask you, are you willing to be brave? Are you willing to face your fear? Are you willing to believe that God still has a plan for you, even if you have failed before? Because if Jonah, the one who ran away, could become a prophet to an entire city, what can God do through you? I want you to do something now. Close your eyes for a moment and take a deep breath. Feel your heart beating. This is the sound of the life God gave you. This is the sound of the opportunity He is still offering you. And I dare you to write in the comments, "I'm not going to run away anymore." Declare it, because the first step to overcoming fear is confronting it. It's telling yourself and the world that you will no longer be a slave to the fear of making mistakes. And if this message touched your heart, I invite you to leave a like, not just as an automatic gesture, but as a declaration of faith, as a way of saying, I believe God has a plan for me. Because sometimes all you need is a little flame of courage to light a fire of faith. But there is something even deeper that you need to understand about the fear of making mistakes. Something that can completely transform the way you see your flaws. Something that can give you a confidence you've never experienced before. So don't leave now. What comes next may be what you've always needed to turn your fear into faith. And even when everything seems to be falling apart around you, when every step you take feels like a false step, there is something you haven't realized yet. Anxiety can make you feel like you're lost in a maze with no way out, like darkness is closing in from all directions. But what few understand is that even in the thickest darkness, a light always shines. Have you ever felt this way? As if the weight of the world is crushing your shoulders, as if no one can understand the pain you carry in silence. But there is a story that reveals a powerful secret, something many ignore. There she was, in the crowd, but completely invisible. A woman, forgotten, rejected, ignored by everyone around her. His heart was crushed by shame, his soul wounded by years of rejection. She carried a pain that no one could see, a pain that bled silently inside her. She had heard about Jesus, the one who healed, the one who transformed lives with just a word. But who was she to approach? Who was she to be worthy of a miracle? And then, that day, something changed. She didn't have the strength to speak. She didn't have the courage to cry out. But inside her heart, a flame of hope began to burn. If I only touch his clothes, she thought, I will be healed. I didn't need applause. I didn't need attention. I just needed a touch, just one tap. Through the crowd, she squeezed herself, fighting the fear, fighting the shame. And then, with shaking hands and a racing heart, she played. And in that instant, everything changed. His body was restored. His pain was healed. But that wasn't all, because Jesus stopped. In the midst of all that crowd, he stopped and looked around him. Who touched me? He asked. And while everyone denied it, she knew. He knew that it was not just his body that had been healed, but his soul. Jesus was not just interested in curing her physical illness, but in restoring her dignity, in giving her back the value that the world had taken away. Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace, he said. He didn't just call her a woman, but a daughter. At that moment, she stopped being just a stranger, a rejected person. She became a beloved, known, and valued daughter. Do you understand what this means? Do you realize how deep this is? It wasn't just about the physical miracle. It was about being seen, about being loved, about being accepted. And maybe today you're feeling exactly like her. Maybe you feel like no one sees your pain, that no one understands what you carry in silence. But I need you to understand something. Jesus sees you. He not only sees what's outside, but what's inside. Your hidden pains, your silent tears, your struggles that no one knows about. You are not just another face in the crowd. You are a daughter, a son, loved and dear to God. And, just like that woman, your faith has the power to transform your life. But do you believe that? Or do you continue to let shame, fear, and doubt stop you from reaching out? You've spent so long hiding, pretending to be okay, smiling while your heart screams for help. But you don't have to live like that anymore. Jesus is not just passing by you. He is stopping. He is calling you. But the question is, will you hide or will you approach? Will you continue to carry this pain alone, or will you reach out and touch the grace that can transform you? What if today was the day everything changed? What if today you decided, like that woman, to take a step of faith, even in the midst of your pain? You don't need a crowd. You don't need anyone's approval. All you need is faith. Faith to believe that Jesus is looking at you now. Faith to believe that he knows your wounds, your struggles, and that he is ready to call you his son, his daughter. But that depends on you. It depends on your decision. It depends on your touch of faith. Because faith is not just a belief, it is an action. It's taking a step even when everything seems impossible. It's trusting even when everything around you says you're not worthy. And now I ask you, are you ready to take this step? Are you ready to leave behind the shame, the fear, and hold on to the promise Jesus has for you? If this word spoke to your heart, if you felt that Jesus is speaking to you, I want you to comment now. I believe that Jesus sees me. No matter how many times you have felt invisible, no matter how many times you have been ignored, today, Jesus sees you, and he calls you son, daughter. Comment now, declare your faith, because this could be the first step towards your healing, towards your liberation. And even when everything around you seems silent, when every prayer seems to reach the ceiling, when God's silence becomes deafening, there is something that few understand, because God's silence is never absence. Often, it is in silence that he speaks loudest. But who could understand this in the midst of pain? Who could see hope in the midst of despair? It's easy to talk about faith when everything is going well. But what about when the pain seems to have no end? What if I told you that, even in your silence, God is preparing something you never imagined? A long time ago, a woman lived surrounded by darkness. Anna was her name. His heart was broken, not by a loss, but by a constant absence. She desperately wanted to have a child, but her womb remained empty. Year after year, she saw other women celebrating while she cried. The people around him didn't understand his pain. Some even ridiculed her, as if her pain were a sign of failure, as if her suffering was deserved. And have you ever felt this way? As if your pain is an invisible burden that no one understands? But Anna didn't give up. She could have closed herself off in her suffering, could have let the bitterness consume her soul, but instead, she did what few do in the midst of pain. She went to the temple, not to complain, not to demand answers, but to pour out your soul before God. Her tears were her words, her silence was her scream, and while others might not have understood, God heard each of their tears. And there's something you need to understand. God doesn't just hear your words, he hears your heart. And it was in that silence, in that place where no one else could understand, that Anna found peace. Not because the miracle happened immediately, but because she found something deeper. She found rest in the presence of God. She did not leave the temple with her son in her arms, but she left with a promise in her heart. And do you understand the power of this? Do you realize that true peace is not the absence of problems, but the presence of God in their midst? Because the biggest response Anna received that day was not a son. It was the certainty that God was with her. But the miracle didn't stop there, because the God who sees in silence also acts in his time. And at the right time, Anna held her son in her arms, a son who would become one of Israel's greatest prophets. Do you understand this? What seemed like God's silence was, in fact, preparation. What seemed like rejection was actually care. And maybe today you are just like Anna, feeling that your prayers are unanswered, that your dreams will never come true. But I need to tell you, God is not silent. He is working on something much bigger than you imagine. And now I ask you, are you willing to continue believing even when you see nothing? Are you willing to pour out your soul before God, even when everything seems silent? Because it's easy to have faith when everything is going well, but it is in the darkness that faith becomes true. It is in silence that God speaks, most profoundly. But do you believe that? Or does your faith depend only on what you see? Anna had nothing in her hands when she left the temple, but she had everything in her heart. She was sure that God was with her. What if today you decided to do the same? What if today you decided not to give up, not to give in to despair? What if you decided to turn your tears into prayer, your silence into faith? You don't need perfect words. You don't need immediate answers. You just need a sincere heart before God, because he knows you. He sees what no one else sees. He understands what no one else understands. And just as he heard Anna, he hears you. But I know it's difficult. I know it's painful. Because the waiting seems eternal, the silence seems unbearable. But there is something you need to understand. God's silence is never absence. He's working, even if you don't realize it. He is taking care of every detail, even when everything seems to fall apart. And at the right time, at the perfect moment, you will see the miracle. But until then, you need to keep going. You need to trust. Can you do this? Can you give your heart to God today? Can you transform your silence into faith? Because the pain is real, I know, but God is even more real, and He is with you, even now, even in the silence. But the decision is yours. Will you let silence destroy you, or will you let it bring you closer to God? Anna could have given up. She could have let despair consume her soul, but she chose faith. And that faith changed everything. And now, I want you to do something. If this message spoke to your heart, if you understand that God is not silent, I want you to comment now. I trust in God, even in silence. No matter what you are facing, no matter how difficult the wait is, declare your faith. Declare that you will not give up, that you will not let despair win, because God's silence is just the prelude to something greater. And even when the darkness seems invincible and the silence is so deep it suffocates, there is something you need to know. Because darkness is not the end. Silence is not the end. Often, it is in the midst of the most intense pain that the deepest truth reveals itself. But who could have imagined that it is in death that we find true life? Who could understand that hope can arise exactly where everything seems lost? Lazarus was dead. 4 days had passed, and the smell of death already enveloped his tomb. His family was desperate. His sister Martha had lost all hope. If the Lord had been here, my brother would not have died, she told Jesus, with tears in her eyes. And maybe you know this pain. The pain of losing something or someone that meant everything to you. The pain of seeing your dreams die, of seeing your faith crumble. Maybe you, like Martha, have questioned God, have wondered why. He didn't come when you needed it most, but Jesus did not turn away from Martha's pain. He didn't ignore her tears. He looked into their eyes and said, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live. But what does this really mean? How can these words transform such deep pain? Maybe you think they are just words, that they are empty promises. But I want you to understand that there is something much deeper here. Because when Jesus approaches Lazarus's tomb, he doesn't just talk, he acts, he cries, God himself weeps, and that changes everything. Do you understand the power of this? God is not indifferent to your pain. He is not a distant observer. He is with you, even in your grief, even in your anguish. He feels what you feel. He understands what no one else understands. But he doesn't stop at tears, because he is not just the God who feels, he is the God who transforms. And that's exactly what he did that day. In front of everyone, Jesus raised his voice and said, Lazarus, come out. And the impossible happened. The dead man lived. What was lost has been restored. What was finished was started again. And maybe you think this is just an old story. But what if I told you that the same voice that called Lazarus out of the tomb is calling you today? What if I told you that there is something in your life that seems dead, but that God wants to revive? Maybe it's your faith that died. Maybe it's your hope. Maybe it's your dream. Maybe you've given up fighting. You've convinced yourself that there's no way out. But I'm here to tell you that no matter how dark the night, how deep the pain, because where Jesus is, death does not have the last word. But the truth is, you need to make a choice. You can remain stuck in grief, believing that all is lost, or you can choose to trust that God is still in control. You can be stuck in the past, or you can hear the voice of Jesus calling you to a new life. But do you believe that? Do you really believe that God can still do the impossible in your life? Because it doesn't matter how desperate the situation is. God has not changed. He's still the same. He is still the one who transforms death into life. And maybe you're thinking, but I've prayed so many times, and nothing has changed. And I understand you. The wait can be painful. The absence of answers can feel like an unbearable void. But do you realize that for Lazarus, the miracle didn't come immediately? There was an interval. There was a wait. And maybe that's exactly where you are now, at halftime, in the silence. But I need you to understand that God's silence is not his absence. It's your preparation. And now I ask you, are you willing to wait? Are you willing to trust even when you don't understand? Are you willing to believe that even when it seems like everything is over, God still has the last word? Because if there's one thing I know, it's that he didn't lose control. He hasn't forgotten you. He didn't abandon you. And if you listen, maybe you will realize that He is calling you. Come out. Get out of your pain. Get out of your unbelief. Get out of your hopelessness. But the choice is yours. You can remain stuck in grief, or you can let Jesus bring you back to life. You can remain stuck in your fear, or you can trust that He still has the power to transform. Because death is not the end. Pain is not the end. In Christ, there is always a new beginning. But do you believe that? Do you have the courage to leave the grave and walk into the light? Or will you remain stuck with what died? And now, I want you to do something. If this message spoke to your heart, if you understand that God is the one who transforms the impossible, I want you to comment now. I believe in life in Christ. No matter what you are facing, no matter how desperate the situation is, declare your faith. Declare that you will not surrender. Because death is not the end, and as long as you breathe, there is hope. But is this all Jesus has to reveal? Is there something deeper than simply leaving the grave? Because often, the problem is not just the grief, but the guilt we carry. The guilt that traps us in an invisible prison. And you're about to discover that forgiveness has much greater power than you realize. And even when it seems like forgiveness is impossible, when guilt becomes an invisible prison that squeezes the heart and suffocates the soul, there is something you need to understand. Because guilt is not the end of your story. It was never meant to be His sentence. And what you're about to discover could set you free once and for all. Because even if you feel unworthy of love, even if the voices of condemnation echo in your mind, there is a truth that no one has told you. And today, it will be revealed. She was dragged into the crowd, exposed, shamed, judged. His eyes were full of tears. His body was shaking. The adulterous woman was thrown at Jesus' feet, and the religious leaders surrounded her with stones in their hands and hatred in their eyes. "Master, this woman was caught in adultery. The law tells us to stone her." And what does the Lord say? They expected a conviction. They were waiting for a sentence, but Jesus did not speak immediately. He bent down and started writing on the floor with his finger. The silence was deafening. Have you ever felt this way? As if I were exposed, ashamed, condemned, as if every mistake in your past was a stone thrown at you? Maybe you weren't dragged into a mob, but guilt and shame have the power to turn your mind into a court of judgment, where every painful memory becomes an accusation. And how many times have you believed that there was no more hope, that your mistake defined who you are? But is this true? Are your mistakes greater than God's love? Jesus continued writing on the ground. What was he writing? Nobody knows for sure. But what matters is what he did next. He stood up, looked at the angry crowd, and said, "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone." And suddenly, silence turned into awareness. One by one, the accusers left their stones on the ground and walked away, until there were only two left, the woman and Jesus. And that's exactly how you are now, alone, before him. Woman, where are your accusers? Has no one condemned you? She, still trembling, looked around and replied, "No one, Lord." And then Jesus, the only one who had the right to condemn her, said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." Do you understand the power of these words? Do you realize what this means? The only one who had the right to judge chose to forgive. The only one who could condemn chose to restore. But why is this so difficult to accept? Why do many of us still carry guilt like a heavy chain, even though we know Jesus has forgiven us? Maybe it's because the voice of the accusation is louder. Maybe because the shame has taken root so deep that you can't believe there is forgiveness for you. But I'm here to tell you that Jesus' forgiveness is greater than any mistake you've made, that the blood of Christ was not shed in vain, that the cross is not just a symbol, but an invitation to leave the weight of guilt at the foot of the cross. But do you really believe that? Do you have the courage to leave the guilt behind? You may be thinking, "But I've failed so many times. I promised I would change, and I failed again." I know. The pain of disappointing God, of disappointing yourself, is unbearable. But what if I told you that God's forgiveness is not based on your performance, but on His grace? What if I told you that He already knew all your flaws and still chose to love you? That He chose to forgive you before you even asked? You are carrying a guilt that Jesus already took on the cross. But you need to make a choice. Are you going to stay stuck with it? Or will you accept the forgiveness that is already yours? And I need you to understand this. Forgiveness is not an emotion. It's a decision to believe that what Jesus did is greater than what you did, that God's love is more powerful than your shame, that you are not defined by your past, but by the love of Christ. And now I ask you, are you willing to forgive yourself? Because God has already forgiven you. But as long as you continue to condemn yourself, you are building your own prison. And maybe you're thinking, but how can I forgive myself if I know I failed? And that's exactly what the enemy wants you to believe, that you are your mistake, that you are your failure, that you are unworthy. But I'm here to tell you that you are loved, that you are chosen, that you are forgiven, not because of what you did, but because of what Jesus did. And if you let this truth enter your heart, you will never be the same. And now, I want you to take a step of faith. If this message spoke to your heart, if you understand that God's forgiveness is greater than any guilt you carry, I want you to comment now. I am forgiven in Christ. Declare it, because there is power in your words. And as you type, I want you to feel the weight of guilt falling. I want you to feel God's love surrounding you, because you are not your mistake. You are loved. You are forgiven. You are free. But is that all? Is forgiveness enough? Because there is something deeper. There is something that many don't realize, because forgiveness is just the beginning. What if I told you that there is something that Jesus wants to restore in you? That forgiveness is just the gateway to a new life. But what comes next is even deeper than you imagine. And even when it seems like faith is just a word lost in the storm, when the fear of failure becomes so suffocating that it paralyzes your steps and erases your hope, there is something you need to know. Because failure is not the end. Fear is not your master. And today, Jesus will reveal something that can transform your life forever. But are you prepared to listen? He was there, in the middle of the early morning darkness. The waves beat furiously against the boat. The wind howled like a desperate cry, and the disciples were terrified. They paddled, fought, but didn't seem to move. It was then that they saw him, a figure walking on water. A spectrum? A ghost? No, it was Jesus. And while dread filled the hearts of the disciples, Peter did something no one expected. Lord, if it is you, send me to meet you on the water. And Jesus, with a voice full of peace in the midst of chaos, said, Come. Pedro got out of the boat. Imagine what he felt. The mixture of faith and fear. The water was cold beneath his feet, but it didn't sink him. Every step was a miracle. He was doing the impossible. But then he looked at the wind, to the waves, into the storm, and in an instant, fear took over. He started to sink. Lord, save me! And immediately, Jesus' hand caught him. Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? How many times have you felt like Pedro? Did you start something with faith, believing that God was with you, but at some point, fear took control? You looked at the problems, the difficulties, the chaos around you, and suddenly, that confidence you had turned into doubt. Maybe you started a dream, a project, a relationship, and in the beginning, everything seemed possible. But then, headwinds arose, the negative voices appeared, and you started to sink. But is the problem a lack of faith? Or where are you? Placing your focus? Jesus has not changed. He remained there, extending his hand to Pedro. The problem wasn't the storm. That was where Peter chose to set his eyes. And the same goes for you. When you focus on your fears, your limitations, the voices that say you won't make it, you start to sink. But when you focus on Jesus, something changes, because he is not just the one who walks on the water. He is the one who turns the impossible into reality. And I ask you, what has made you sink? Is it the fear of failure? Blame for past mistakes? The insecurity of not being good enough? Or have you simply lost focus? Because the truth is that faith is not the absence of fear. It's the choice to look to Jesus, even when everything around you screams otherwise. It's the courage to keep moving, even when you feel like you're sinking. Have you ever tried to fight fear alone? Have you ever tried to convince yourself that everything will work out, only to see your strength disappear? It's because you were trying to walk on water without holding Jesus' hand. But today, he is reaching out to you. He is saying, "Come." Not because you are strong, but because he is. Not because you deserve it, but because he loves you. And even if you have sunk 1,000 times, he is here, ready to lift you up again. And now, I want you to take action. I want you to declare your faith. If this message spoke to your heart, if you understand that fear can no longer control your life, I want you to comment now. I choose to trust in Jesus. Declare it, because there is power in your words. And as you type, I want you to feel the fear fading away. I want you to feel the hand of Jesus holding you, lifting you, strengthening you. But is that all? Is just trusting in Jesus enough? Because there is something deeper. There is something that many people ignore. Because trusting Jesus doesn't mean the winds will stop immediately. It does not mean that the storm will disappear immediately. But it means that even in the midst of chaos, you are not alone. That the hand that created the universe is the same that holds you. And I need to tell you something that perhaps no one has told you. The greatest danger is not failure. The biggest danger is giving up. The biggest danger is losing focus. It's letting fear convince you that you're not capable. It's believing the lie that Jesus is not with you. But today, this lie will fall, because you will choose to look to him. You will choose to trust, even when everything seems lost. But there is something more. Because when you choose to trust Jesus, you not only find the strength to keep from sinking, you discover you can walk on water, that the impossible is just an opportunity for a miracle, and that every time you start to sink, he is there to lift you up, because his love is greater than your fear. And if you accept this today, your life will never be the same. But what if I told you that there is a reason why you have struggled so much with fear? That there is something deeper than just a lack of faith? That there is a truth that few know, but that will be revealed today? Because fear is just the symptom, but there is a root that needs to be exposed. And if you stay here, you'll find out what it is. Because what comes next could change everything. And even when it seems like every step you take is followed by a shadow of doubt, when insecurity becomes your constant companion, whispering that you're not good enough, that you'll never be able to do it, there's a truth you need to hear. Because that voice that makes you doubt is not the voice of God. And today, Jesus is going to reveal something that can completely transform the way you see yourself. But are you ready to face the truth? Imagine the cold night, the unsettling silence, and a lonely man, hidden, with a heart full of uncertainty. That was Gideon, an ordinary man, living in fear, hiding in the wine press, trying to thresh wheat to survive. His heart was beating fast, his mind was full of insecurities. He was just another one, someone small, insignificant in the eyes of others, or at least that's what he believed. But then, a powerful voice broke the silence. "The Lord is with you, valiant warrior." Brave, warrior. These words seemed so far from Gideon's reality. How could he, a weak and fearful man, be a warrior? And have you ever felt this way? Did you look in the mirror and see nothing but weaknesses, flaws, and limitations? Have you ever felt like you were fighting alone? Like you were just another person in the crowd, insignificant, worthless? Gideon didn't believe in himself. And maybe like him, you've also convinced yourself that you're not good enough, that your mistakes define who you are, that your flaws are all that others see, that you are too small to be used by God. But is this true? Or is there a lie that you have believed for so long that it has become your reality? Gideon questioned. If the Lord is with us, why is all this happening? He looked at his circumstances, at his limitations, and forgot that God's presence is not based on what we see, but on who he is. And yet, God did not give up on him. God did not choose Gideon because he was strong, but because he saw something that Gideon himself did not see. And in the same way, God looks at you now, and he sees what you cannot see. He sees your value. He sees your potential. He sees a warrior, even when all you see is weakness. And perhaps your biggest battle is not against the problems you face, but against the lies you believe. The lie that you are too small. The lie that you are not loved. The lie that you have no purpose. But what Jesus is revealing to you today is that these lies have no power over you, because the truth is you are loved, that you are called, that you are chosen. And I ask you, how many times have you let these lies paralyze you? How many dreams have you abandoned because you believed you weren't good enough? How many times have you stopped trying because you thought you would fail? How many opportunities have you missed because fear got the better of you? But what if I told you that the only thing standing between you and the purpose God has for your life is your own belief that you are not capable? God called Gideon to lead an army, but not an ordinary army. He started with thousands, but God reduced the number. And why did he do this? Because God wanted Gideon to understand that victory did not come from his strength, but from the presence of God. That no matter how many people are by your side, if God is with you, you are invincible. And what happened? Gideon, that man full of fear and insecurity, became a leader. He faced his enemies and won, not because he was strong, but because he trusted in the one who is all-powerful. And today, Jesus is calling you to win, not because you are perfect, not because you have never failed, but because he is with you. And now I want you to do something. I want you to face this lie that has imprisoned you. If this message spoke to your heart, if you understand that lies will no longer define who you are, I want you to comment now. I am brave because God is with me. Write this down. Declare it. And as you type, I want you to feel the weight of insecurity falling away. I want you to feel the truth of God filling your heart. But what if I told you that there is still something deeper? That insecurity is not just a passing feeling, but a root that needs to be uprooted? That there is a powerful truth that can forever change the way you see yourself? And if you stay here, you'll find out, because what comes next will reveal the secret to overcoming all insecurity. And that could change everything. And even when it seems like every mistake you make turns into a permanent mark on your soul, when regret becomes your constant companion, whispering that you don't deserve to be forgiven, that your sins are too great, there is a truth you need to hear, because the guilt you carry is not what God wants for you. And today, Jesus is going to reveal something that can completely change the way you see forgiveness. But are you ready to receive this forgiveness? Imagine the dust rising as he walked. A young man, head down, heart heavy, slow steps and empty hands. This was the prodigal son. A young man who had taken everything his father had given and wasted it on a meaningless life. Every coin he spent, every night he lived away, took him further away from what really mattered. He thought he knew what freedom was, but all he found was slavery. He thought he was enjoying life, but all he experienced was emptiness. And when everything was gone, when the false shine of the world disappeared, he found himself alone, tending pigs, longing to feed on the animals' food. But no one gave him anything. He was at rock bottom. And maybe you know that feeling. Perhaps you have already found yourself surrounded by the results of your own choices, trapped in the consequences of your own mistakes, feeling the weight of guilt, the shame of who you have become, the fear that no one will ever accept you again. But then, something happened. He remembered his father. He remembered the house where there was always love, where there was always bread, where even the servants were treated with dignity. And in the midst of the mud, in the midst of despair, he decided to return. But he did not expect forgiveness. He didn't expect to be called son again. All he wanted was to be treated like a servant, someone worthless, someone who just survived. He didn't feel worthy of being loved. And perhaps, like him, you have also convinced yourself that you are not worthy of being forgiven, that your mistakes are too big, that you went too far, that God could never take you back. But what Jesus will reveal to you now is that God's forgiveness is not like men's forgiveness. God doesn't look at your past to decide if you deserve to be loved. He looks at your heart. And even though you've walked away, even though you've wasted everything, He still waits for you. As the prodigal son approached the house, something unexpected happened. His father saw him from afar. He didn't wait for his son to arrive. He did not meet him with accusations. He did not demand explanations. He ran to meet him. He hugged him, kissed him. And while the son tried to say that he was no longer worthy, the father interrupted. He ordered the best clothes to be brought, a ring to be put on her finger, sandals on her feet. He ordered a banquet to be prepared, because he who was lost had been found. What was dead had come back to life. And this is what God wants you to understand. His forgiveness is not based on who you are or what you have done. It's based on who He is. He is love, He is grace, He is mercy. And no matter how far you've gone, no matter what you've done, He is always ready to embrace you again. You don't need to live in guilt. You don't need to carry the weight of your past. Jesus has already paid the price. And now He is calling you to return. But what about you? Will you continue to believe that you do not deserve forgiveness? Will you continue living like a servant when God calls you a son? How many times have you tried to hide? How many times have you walked away because you thought you weren't worthy? But today Jesus reveals to you that your value is not determined by your mistakes. Your value is determined by the love of God. And I want you to do something now. I want you to face this lie that imprisons you. If this message spoke to your heart, if you understand that God loves you and forgives you, I want you to comment now. I am a child of God and I am forgiven. Write this down. Declare it. Not as someone who expects to be accepted, but as someone who has already been accepted. Because the truth is that God has already forgiven you. And as you type, I want you to feel the weight of guilt falling. I want you to feel the peace of God filling your heart. But what if I told you that there is still something deeper? That forgiveness is not just about how God feels about you, but about how you feel about yourself. That there is a powerful truth that can forever change the way you deal with your mistakes? And if you stay here, you'll find out. Because what comes next will reveal the secret to overcoming all guilt. And that could change everything. And even when it seems like silence is the only answer you can find, there is a truth that few know. A truth that can transform your pain into hope, your emptiness into fullness. And to understand this truth, we need to delve into a story that reveals much more than meets the eye. She was a woman who lived in the shadows, carrying a pain that no one could see. Her life was marked by an illness that isolated her, which made her impure in the eyes of everyone. Nobody wanted to be near her. She was avoided, ignored, forgotten. Each day was a silent battle, a fight against the despair that grew in his heart. For 12 long years, she sought help. She knocked on doors that never opened, trusted people who only took what little she had. Doctors, advice, empty promises. Nothing cured her. His body weakened, his soul was lost, and hope seemed just a distant memory. Maybe you felt this way, like someone fighting something invisible. A pain that no one understands. A void that no one can fill. And even though the world around you keeps spinning, inside you there is a storm that never stops. But this woman, even in the midst of darkness, heard about Jesus. She heard that He healed, that He restored, that He gave life where there was only death. And something inside her lit up, a spark of faith that no one could see. She had no strength. She had no friends. She had nothing. But she had a decision that would change everything. She decided that if she just touched Jesus' clothes, she would be healed. I didn't need words. I didn't need to be noticed. Just one tap, just a gesture of faith. And then, through the crowd, she slipped away, weak, invisible, but determined. And when he finally reached out and touched the hem of Jesus' robe, something extraordinary happened. His pain disappeared. His shame was erased. His body was restored. But it wasn't just that. Jesus stopped. In the midst of the crowd, He stopped and asked, "Who touched me?" The disciples wondered how He could ask such a question with so many people around. But Jesus knew. He felt the touch of faith. And then, that woman, who wanted to go unnoticed, was called to the center. She was shaking, but it was no longer fear that controlled her. It was the power of truth. She knelt before Jesus and told her whole story. And instead of judgment, He received love. Instead of rejection, He received acceptance. And Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be free from your evil. Mark 5:34. Do you understand this? She was called daughter. The one that no one wanted, that no one saw, was called daughter by God himself. And maybe that's what you need to hear today. Maybe you carry a pain that no one understands, a shame that you hide, an emptiness that seems to consume you. But just as Jesus stopped for that woman, he stops for you now. He doesn't just see your pain. He calls you his son, his daughter. And if you have the courage to reach out, even if no one sees you, even if you feel invisible, he will be there. But do you know what's deeper in this story? It wasn't physical touch that healed that woman. It was the faith behind the touch. It was the decision to believe that Jesus was greater than his pain, that he was greater than their shame, that he was greater than all the years of suffering. And that's what you need today, faith. A faith that goes beyond pain, a faith that does not depend on circumstances, a faith that looks to Jesus and finds healing. Have you ever thought that perhaps what you need most is not an external change, but an internal transformation? That before changing the situation around you, Jesus wants to change something inside you. That before healing your body, he wants to heal your soul. And that's why today I invite you, touch Jesus with faith, not just with words, not just with desires, but with true faith. Because when you do that, everything changes. And even if the world around you remains the same, something inside you will be transformed forever. Are you willing to take that step of faith, touching Jesus with everything you are? If this message spoke to your heart, I want you to write here in the comments, I touch Jesus with faith. It's not just a sentence. It's a commitment, a decision, a declaration that, like that woman, you also decided to reach out and touch the one who transforms lives. And if you think this message can help someone, share it. Because just as that woman heard about Jesus and found healing, someone can hear through you and find the same peace. But wait, there's something even deeper you need to know. Because what happened to that woman wasn't just a physical healing. It was a spiritual revelation. And what you're about to discover could transform your life forever. And even when all seems lost, when shame and judgment seem to be the only answer, there is a truth that few know. A truth that is not just a word, but a revelation that has the power to transform the deepest pain into hope. And this truth is revealed in a story that changed a woman's life forever. She had no name in the eyes of others. To them, she was just the sinner, a woman caught in adultery, dragged into the crowd like a trophy of condemnation. His accusers were not interested in justice, but in humiliating it, in using it as a means of testing Jesus. Their hearts were filled with judgment, with hate, with contempt. To them, she was just an example to be stoned. Have you ever felt this way, judged, condemned, as if everyone around you was just waiting for your mistake to point the finger? Maybe you've tried to be strong, to keep up appearances, but inside there's a voice that screams, a pain that won't go away. That's how she felt. The crowd surrounded her. The stones were already in her hands, ready to be thrown. His eyes were full of hate, but hers were full of tears. She had nowhere else to run. There was no way to defend himself. It was the end. But then, in the midst of all that chaos, Jesus was there, silent but present. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. Instead, he bent down and began writing on the ground. What did he write? Nobody knows. But what happened next was unforgettable. Let him who is without sin among you cast the first stone. A single sentence, but it silenced the crowd. The sound of stones falling to the ground was the music of mercy. One by one, they left. First the oldest, then the youngest. Because deep down, everyone knew that they carried their own guilt, their own faults. And there, in the middle of the silence, she was. The woman who would be stoned. The woman who would be destroyed. But now, she stood before Jesus. And when she finally looked up, perhaps expecting the same judgment, she found something she had never seen. Love. Woman, where are your accusers? Has no one condemned you? She replied, almost in disbelief. No one, Lord. And then Jesus said, Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. John 8:10-11. Do you understand the power of these words? She, who was known only as a sinner, found forgiveness. She, who was condemned to death, found life. And perhaps you, who are watching now, also feel trapped by your mistakes, by your failures, by your shame. Maybe you feel like no one understands, that everyone around you just points out your flaws. But I need you to know something. Jesus doesn't see you the way others do. He doesn't see you as the world labels you. He sees your heart. He sees your pain. And he is not here to condemn you. He is here to lift you up. But there is something even deeper to this story, because what Jesus did was not just forgive that woman. He gave her a new identity. She, who was known as the sinner, was now called the daughter of God. She, who was seen as a disgrace, was now an example of grace. And that's what he does for you. When the world calls you a failure, he calls you loved. When the world accuses you, he defends you. When the world abandons you, he welcomes you. But there is one truth you need to understand. Jesus' forgiveness is not permission to continue in error. It is an opportunity for transformation. Go and sin no more. These words are not a threat, but a promise that your life no longer needs to be marked by guilt, shame, pain. You no longer need to be a prisoner of your past, but you may ask, how can I be forgiven? How can I be transformed? And the answer is simple: repentance and faith. Repentance is not just feeling remorse. It's a change of direction. It's deciding that you no longer want to live the same way. And faith is believing that Jesus is enough, that his forgiveness is greater than your mistakes, that his love is stronger than your guilt. And today, I invite you to do what that woman did, to place yourself at the feet of Jesus, to confess, not to be condemned, but to be healed. And if this message spoke to your heart, I want you to write here in the comments, I receive forgiveness from Jesus. It's not just a sentence. It is a declaration of faith. It is a confession that you believe that, like that woman, you too can be forgiven, restored, transformed. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share it. Because there are many people who live in silence, carrying a guilt that Jesus has already erased. But wait, there's something even deeper you need to know. Because what happened to that woman wasn't just forgiveness. It was a revelation. And what you're about to discover could transform your life forever. And even when everything seems to fall apart, when the pain becomes unbearable and hope seems a distant shadow, there is a truth that few understand, a truth that can transform even the darkest moments into a testimony of faith. And this truth is revealed in the story of Job, a man who had everything: family, wealth, respect. His life was a testament to prosperity and blessing. But in a single instant, everything changed. Lightning strikes of tragedy destroyed his possessions. His servants were killed. His children were taken from him. And when it seemed that nothing could get worse, his body was covered with painful wounds, and his health crumbled like dust in the wind. Have you ever felt this way? Like everything around you is falling apart? As if the pain had no end and each day brought a new blow? Job didn't just lose everything. He was abandoned by those who were supposed to comfort him. His friends, who were supposed to be his support, became his accusers. Instead of bringing words of comfort, they brought judgment. You must have done something wrong, they said. God would not punish an innocent person. And maybe you've heard this too. Perhaps in your suffering, the people around you questioned your faith, judged your actions, doubted your sincerity. Maybe you've even started to question yourself. Job was alone in his pain. His nights were long. His days were torment, and God's silence seemed like a sentence. But even in the midst of darkness, even when his lips screamed in despair, Job never abandoned his faith. He questioned, he cried, he screamed, but he never stopped believing. And then, in the midst of his suffering, something incredible happened. God spoke, not with words of condemnation, not with judgment, but with a revelation. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Job 38:4. God did not come to explain Job's suffering. He came to reveal who he is, the creator, the sustainer, the one who has control of everything, even when the world seems in chaos. And it was in this encounter with God that Job discovered the deepest truth. His pain was not the end. His suffering was not a punishment. It was a path to a greater revelation. Because in the midst of his pain, Job not only learned about God, he knew God. And maybe you're going through something that seems impossible. Maybe your tears are so many that you can't see beyond the darkness. But just like Job, you need to understand that your pain is not the end. Your suffering is not a sentence. It is a door to a revelation. But here's something almost no one notices in the story of Job. When God restored Job, he didn't just give him twice as much as he had lost. God gave Job something even more valuable, unshakable faith. A faith that did not depend on blessings, but on a true relationship with God. Have you ever stopped to think that your pain could be the setting where God wants to reveal himself to you in ways you never imagined? That God's silence is not an abandonment, but a preparation for a revelation? But there is something more, something that few understand. When Job prayed for his friends, those who had accused him, God blessed him even more. Because true forgiveness is not just a word, it is a release. Job was healed not only in his body, but in his soul. And maybe what's missing for you to find peace is exactly that, forgiveness. Not just the forgiveness you receive, but the forgiveness you offer. Because when you forgive, you free yourself. When you let go of the weight of resentment, you make space for healing. And now I need to ask you, is there anyone you need to forgive? Is there someone who hurt you, who judged you, who abandoned you at your worst moment? Maybe that person doesn't deserve your forgiveness, but forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about liberation. And I want you to do something now. If this word spoke to your heart, I want you to write here in the comments, I forgive and I am free. It's not just a sentence. It's a statement, a decision to no longer be a prisoner of pain, a decision to be like Job, to know God in the midst of pain, to forgive those who hurt you, and to be restored in ways you never imagined. But wait, there is something even deeper. Because what God did for Job was not just restore what he had lost. God turned Job's pain into a testimony. And what you're about to discover is that your pain can also become a testimony. If you are here, if you have reached this point, it is because God is speaking to you. It's not by chance. God knows every tear you shed, every silent prayer you said, every night you thought you couldn't do it anymore. And today, he says to you, I am your Redeemer, and I live. Job 19:25. Your pain is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where your faith will be stronger, where your hope will be restored, where your testimony will be a light to those who are in darkness. And if you know someone who is going through deep pain, I want you to share this message. Because just as Job found God in the midst of his pain, so can this person. But there is something else you need to know. Because what comes next is something few understand, something that can transform your life forever. And even when everything seems to be silent, when prayers become just words thrown into the void, when the sky seems closed and the heart drowns in despair, there is something you need to know. God's silence is not his abandonment. In the story of Mary and Martha, there was a pain so deep that it seemed impossible to bear. Lazarus, their brother, was sick, very sick, and they did what any person of faith would do. They sent a message to Jesus. They knew he could heal him. They believed in his power, but Jesus didn't come. The days passed, hope faded, and Lazarus died. Have you ever felt this way? Praying, crying out, hoping for a miracle, but all you find is silence. Perhaps you have asked, where is God? Perhaps you have already felt that he has abandoned you, that your prayers have been ignored. But what no one told you is that God's silence is not the end. The silence of God is the space where faith is tested and glory is revealed. 4 days passed. 4 days in which despair turned into pain. 4 days in which the tomb was sealed and hope buried. And then, finally, Jesus came. But instead of finding faith, he found tears. Martha ran to meet him. Lord, if you were here, my brother would not have died. And maybe you said that to God. Lord, if you had been with me, I would not have lost everything. If the Lord were here, I wouldn't be suffering like this. But Jesus did not turn away. He did not condemn Martha for her pain. He looked into her eyes and said, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live." John 11:25. And even before the tomb, even when death seemed to have won, Jesus did not give up. He cried. Yes, the Son of God himself wept, because he is not indifferent to your pain. He sees your tears. He feels your suffering. But then, something no one expected happened. Jesus ordered the stone to be rolled away. And Martha, with a broken heart, asked, "Sir, it already smells bad. It's been 4 days." But Jesus replied, "If you believe, you will see the glory of God." John 11:40. And it was at that moment that the impossible became reality. With a firm voice, Jesus cried out, "Lazarus, come out!" And he who was dead came out. Death has been conquered. Hope was restored. Have you ever wondered why Jesus waited? Why didn't he heal Lazarus before he died? Because he didn't just want to heal Lazarus. He wanted to resurrect him. He didn't just want to answer a prayer. He wanted to turn that pain into a testimony. And maybe that's what God is doing in your life right now. Maybe you are in a quiet moment. Maybe you feel like your prayers are not being heard. But what if I told you that what appears to be silence is actually preparation? That what seems like the end is just the beginning of something much bigger? Because when God takes time, it's not because he has forgotten you. It's because he is preparing something that goes beyond what you can imagine. But now I want to ask you, do you still believe? Do you still believe even when everything seems lost? Do you still believe even when the pain is unbearable? I don't know what grave you are facing. I don't know what hope you feel has been buried. But I know that the same Jesus who raised Lazarus is by your side. And he is telling you, if you believe, you will see the glory of God. But there is something even deeper, because the resurrection of Lazarus was not just a miracle, it was a revelation that even in death, even in silence, Jesus is life. And I want you to do something now. If this word spoke to your heart, if you are going through a silence that seems endless, I want you to write here in the comments, "I believe, even in the midst of silence." It's not just a sentence, it is a declaration of faith. It is a proclamation that silence will not defeat you, that despair will not consume you. Because even though it may seem like everything is over, there is a God who is saying, "I am the resurrection and the life." And I want you to understand that when Jesus waits, it's because the miracle he has for you is even greater. Maybe it won't be the way you expect, maybe not in the time you want, but it will be much bigger than you imagine. And if you know someone who is going through painful silence, share this message. Because just as Martha and Mary needed to hear that Jesus is life, maybe this person needs it too. But don't stop here, because what comes next is even deeper, something that few realize in the story of Lazarus. It was not just Lazarus who was resurrected. It was the faith of Martha and Mary that was restored. It was their trust in God that was renewed. And maybe what you need most today isn't just a miracle. Perhaps what you need most is a faith that does not depend on signs, but that trusts God even in silence. A faith that is not destroyed by the time of waiting, but is strengthened in it. And if you want that faith, if you want a faith that remains firm even when God seems silent, I want you to say, "I believe, even in the midst of silence," because this is the faith that changes everything, the faith that transforms silence into hope, the faith that transforms pain into testimony. And if you are here until now, it is because God is speaking to you. He knows every tear you shed, every prayer you said, every night you thought about giving up. But today, he is telling you, "I am the resurrection and the life, and if you believe, you will see the glory of God." Because what seems like the end is just the beginning of something much bigger. And even when everything around you seems to demand that you be someone you're not, when the pressure to please people turns into an unbearable burden, there's a truth that few know. No matter how much you try to please everyone, you will never be enough for those who don't know how to value who you really are. And that's exactly what Saul experienced. A man who began with his heart wanting to please God, but who lost his way in the desire to please people. Saulo's story is deeper than many imagine. As king of Israel, he had everything to be a blessed leader, an example of faith and obedience. But the fear of losing the people's approval led him to make disastrous decisions. On a critical occasion, the prophet Samuel had given a clear order: wait until he arrived to offer the sacrifice. But the days passed. The people began to disperse, the pressure increased, and Saul gave in. He offered the sacrifice without waiting for the prophet. And at that moment, when Samuel arrived and confronted him, Saul tried to justify his actions. "I saw that the people were scattering and you were not arriving." 1 Samuel 13:11. Have you ever felt this way? Forced to make decisions you didn't want to make, just so you don't disappoint others. Maybe you did things you knew weren't right, just to be accepted, just to hear a compliment, just to feel like you belonged. But the truth is that whenever you try to please everyone, you end up losing yourself. Saulo didn't stop there. On another occasion, God gave him a specific order: to completely destroy the Amalekites and everything they possessed. But once again, the desire to please the people spoke louder. Instead of obeying, he spared the best of the animals and King Agag, saying it was to offer as a sacrifice to the Lord. But Samuel was not fooled. He looked Saul in the eye and said, "It is better to obey than to sacrifice." 1 Samuel 15:22. And in that moment, Saul realized that his need to please others had become his undoing. And how many times have you also lost yourself trying to be what was expected of you? How many times have you hidden your true essence, your values, your principles just to avoid being rejected? But there's something you need to understand. Men's approval is fleeting. Today, you are applauded. Tomorrow, forgotten. But God's approval is eternal, and He is not impressed by appearances, by beautiful words, or by attitudes that do not come from a sincere heart. When Samuel confronted Saul, he revealed a truth that many ignore. God does not see as man sees. Man looks at appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And maybe you've lived a life trying to appear strong, trying to appear happy, trying to appear perfect, but God sees beyond that. He sees your insecurities, your fears, your weaknesses. He sees the tears you hide, the forced smiles, the sacrifices you make, just to be accepted. And He's telling you today, you don't need to please everyone. You just need to please me. But that's not easy, is it? Because the fear of rejection is real. The fear of not being accepted, of being criticized, of being left behind. The fear of being alone. But what you don't realize is that by trying to please everyone, you end up losing the only approval that really matters, God's. And maybe you've already felt this. Maybe you've looked in the mirror and haven't recognized who you've become. Perhaps you have asked yourself, who am I really? But the truth is that you are a child of God, and your identity is not in what others think of you. It's not in the praise, the criticism, the applause, or the booing. Your identity is in Christ. What if I told you that God didn't create you to please everyone, that He didn't call you to be like everyone else, that He didn't choose you to live a life of superficial approval, that He chose you to live in freedom? For where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. 2 Corinthians 3:17. And this freedom begins when you decide to put aside the weight of trying to please everyone and give yourself completely to God. Because when you please God, you no longer need the approval of men. And I want you to do something now. If this word spoke to your heart, if you are tired of trying to please everyone, if you want to be free from this burden, I want you to write here in the comments, I choose to please God. It's not just a sentence. It is a declaration of freedom. It's a decision to live for the one who really matters. And if you know someone who lives trapped in the need to please others, share this message. Because perhaps this person also needs to hear that the approval of men is fleeting, but the approval of God is eternal. And I want you to understand that it doesn't matter what the world says about you. It doesn't matter if people reject you, criticize you, ignore you. God sees you. God knows you. And He loves you exactly as you are. You don't have to pretend. You don't need to hide. You don't need to please everyone. You just need to please God. And when you do that, you find true peace. Peace that does not depend on the opinions of others. The peace that is not shaken by criticism. the peace that comes from knowing you are loved unconditionally. So, take a deep breath. Let go of the burden of trying to please everyone, and give your heart to God. Because when you live to please God, you discover who you really are. And if you are here until now, it is because God is speaking to you. He is calling you to a life of freedom. He is calling you to be who He created you to be, not to be perfect, not to be what others expect, but to be true. And I want you to understand that from today onwards, you are no longer a prisoner of other people's opinions. You are free, free to live for God, free to be who He created you to be, free to please the only one who really matters. So I ask you, are you ready to live this freedom? Are you ready to stop seeking approval from men and start living to please God? If you are ready, right. I choose to please God. Because this is the decision that changes everything. You've come this far, and that's not by chance. If you're still watching, it's because God is speaking directly to your heart. It's not just a video. They are not just words. It's the presence of God reaching out to you, touching the deepest areas of your soul, bringing to light those pains you tried to hide, those wounds you thought no one would see. But God sees. He knows every tear you shed in silence, every night when fear took over your heart, every time you smiled on the outside while inside you felt destroyed. And now He calls you. He calls you to freedom, to peace, to a life that is no longer defined by pain, rejection, or fear. I want to invite you to something now. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes. Let these words sink into your heart, because they are not just human words. It's God talking to you. Come to me, all, you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. You have been carrying burdens that are not yours. You've been trying to be strong when all you wanted was someone to hold you. But now, at this very moment, God is here. He's holding you, and I want to invite you to pray with me, but not just an ordinary prayer. A prayer that is a cry from your soul, a cry for liberation, for peace, for healing. Because what you are going to do now is open your heart to the one who never leaves you. Lord Jesus, I come before you now, with all my pain, with all my fears, with all my failures. I can't carry this alone anymore. I no longer want to live to please others, to seek approval from men. I need your peace. I need your love. I need your presence. Come into my life, Lord. Heal my wounds. Restore my heart. Break the chains that have held me back. Free me from anxiety, fear, insecurity. I surrender to you all that I am, all that I have, all that I cannot control. I choose to live for you. I choose to trust you. I choose to be free in you. In Jesus' name, amen. If you prayed this prayer, if you opened your heart to God now, I want you to write in the comments, I give everything to Jesus. It's not just a sentence. It's an act of faith. It is a declaration that you are no longer alone. And I want you to do one more thing. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Because just as God touched you, He can touch other lives. Be an instrument of God to take this word to those who need it. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now. It's not just about another video. It's about being connected to a community of faith, where you will always find messages that will strengthen your soul and remind you of God's love. But I need to tell you something. What you will discover in the video that is on screen now could change your life even more. Don't leave without watching, because what comes next could be the answer you've been waiting for. It's like a continuation of what God began to do in you today. Don't miss it. It's not just another video. It is the next step on your journey of healing and liberation. And if this message spoke to you, if you felt God speaking to your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share with someone you love, someone who also needs to feel this peace, this healing, this presence. Because what you received is not just for you. It's to touch lives. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May He make His face shine upon you and give you peace. Because whoever trusts in God will never be put to shame. May you walk in the certainty that you are loved, that you are seen, that you are cared for. And may your life never again be defined by pain, but by the presence of God. Now go and continue your journey of faith, because what God started today is just the beginning, and what comes next could transform everything.